Please be seated. Just before we call Mr. Godfrey, I make a general statement. In relation to witnesses who will be giving evidence today and in coming days, it may be necessary to canvass material that has been provided by patrons of the casino who cannot be named. From time to time, it may be necessary to take evidence in private sessions. In that case, appropriate orders will be made at the time. During public hearings, everyone, witnesses, counsel and commissioners alike, should exercise caution to ensure that patrons are not named, and in case there is a slip or inadvertent naming, there is a general non-publication order made by virtue of this statement prohibiting the naming of those individuals. In case of a slip or inadvertent naming, counsel should raise the issue as soon as possible, and the general non-publication order can be made specific. We will also need to guard against the display on public screens of documents that name patrons. This does not apply to documents that are already tendered as part of the public record and in respect of which a non-publication order has not been made. Similarly, if the name of a patron is already a matter of public record, the general non-publication order can, on application, be lifted in relation to that individual. So we will now have Mr. Godfrey, please. Mr. Godfrey, do you wish to affirm or take an oath?
Affirm, please.
Could you just read the words of the affirmation?
I, Anthony Robin Godfrey, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Godfrey. Please sit down, Mr. Shaw.
Pleasure, Commissioner. Could I ask the operator, please, to put document CRW 998002004. Yes, speak to me to it. Mr. Godfrey, do you have that document on the screen in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Could we just scroll just quickly through that to the end, please, operator? And your signature is redacted there, but that is your witness statement.
Yes.
Mr. Godfrey. Commissioner, I tender that.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. The witness statement of Anthony Robin Godfrey, dated the 15th of September 2021 and bearing the identifier number CRW.998.002.0485_R, is admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Ms. Spencer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Godfrey, my name's Anne Spencer and I'm one of the counsel assisting this Royal Commission. I'm going to take you through your statement today and ask you just to clarify some of your evidence.
Sure. And
in some instances, I might ask you to expand on that evidence. There might also be some further topics which I will ask you about also. All right. Now, firstly, Mr. Godfrey, you have been employed at Crown Perth since February 1986, is that right?
Yes.
But prior to that, you had experience working in casinos in London between 1978 and 1986?
Correct.
What sorts of things were you doing at those casinos in London?
In London, I was a dealer to start off with. I was then an inspector. I did some training as well during that period of time, and that was basically it in a nutshell.
All right. And how is it that you came to work in Perth?
They were advertising in London when they opened up, or in the process of opening up Adelaide Casino and Burswood. And I had the opportunity, I had the interview in London, and I had the opportunity to come across to Australia to work. I was given the job.
All right. So did you work in South Australia first?
No, straight to Perth.
Straight to Perth, okay.
Yes.
All right, and now your current role since August 2019 is Premium Compliance Manager?
That's correct.
And is that a full-time role?
Yes, it is.
And so, say 40 hours a week, is that what
Basically,
you do?
yes.
And do you have like a set roster or are you doing shift work or?
It was mainly Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, those sort of times.
I see. And what does your role entail?
Well, I'm looking after the premium gaming element of the Pearl Room, and that's basically our local members, our WA-based local members in the Pearl Room. I oversee any compliance issues that might sort of come up from either the players or I also look after membership and the guest and member entry into the Pearl Room. So it's really just overseeing the whole area and making sure that everyone is complying and specifically, you know, when it comes to entry into the Pearl Room, that is done through the procedures and our SOPs.
I see. And now would you describe your current role as patron facing?
Not so much now. It's more so office bound, basically. So I occasionally say, meet a patron or whatever the case might be, but it's mainly an office style job nowadays.
And when you're meeting those patrons, why are you meeting them? You mentioned compliance issues earlier.
I may walk into the Pearl Room to have a bit of a wander around and see what's going on, and there might be some patrons that recognise me when I was in the position of Pearl Room manager, years back, and it's just a general chat.
And just going back to those compliance issues which you mentioned describing your role, what sorts of issues are brought to your attention?
Well, we have a daily compliance report that's completed by our Pearl Room hosts every day, and they'll put down anything that's unusual that may have occurred in the Pearl Room. So it could be somebody tripping on the floor, it could be complaints made, it could be somebody becoming aggressive, could be the occasional intox patron, had too much to drink, or just any issue that is out of the norm, and the expectation is that they report it.
And these complaints, are these complaints from patrons or from staff?
From patrons.
Okay, and what sorts of complaints do you see, David?
They feel, something may have happened on a gaming table that they weren't happy about. They weren't happy with the service in the Pearl Room. They may have made a complaint they're not winning any money. It varies.
So just trying to get a feel for what you do day to day. You receive these daily compliance reports.
Yes.
What other? Are you assessing applications for the Pearl Room or?
To a degree, yes, to a degree. But when I look at the daily compliance report, I'll see if there's any issues there that I need to follow up. The way that I've structured the report is that the incident has been entered into the report, and it will go through various departments who will basically follow up or resolve the issue as such. If there's anything there that I think I might need to follow up a bit further, then I'll do so.
And is it the case that you currently have no one reporting to you?
Correct.
And is there a plan, as far as you're aware, to have people report to you in the future?
We're going through some pretty major changes at this point in time. I don't quite know what's going to be happening in the next 2 or 3 months at this point in time, but it hasn't been mentioned to me yet.
Okay, so it's a wait and see sort of situation.
Well, it's a wait and see, but there's been no indication that at some point in time I'll have 2 or 3 people working for me or reporting to me. It hasn't been mentioned.
Okay. Now, you report to Ms. Corey Cairns,
Correct.
Is that right? And she's the Executive General Manager of Table Games?
Yes.
I'm just going to call up a document which is an organisation chart. We could have CRW.701.004.9492. I'll just give you a moment to have a look at that. I just want to see where you fit in this picture. You can see Lon Cross's name at the top is the CEO, and then there's 5 people sitting below.
Yes.
And second across is Corey Cairns, EGM Table Games.
Yes.
That's Executive General Manager.
Yes, it is.
And so, and then sitting below Ms. Cairns, there's Chris Schoenmakers.
Yep.
Do you have anything to do with Mr. Schoenmakers?
Yeah, he's part of the Table Games operation, and we have an office virtually next door to each other.
But there's no, you don't report to him at all. You just report directly to Ms. Cairns.
To Corey.
Yes.
When she was on maternity leave, I did report. Chris stepped into her position, And for that period of time, I was reporting to Chris.
Okay. And then Sam Brown, do you have anything to do with?
Yeah, obviously I know him, but
Yes.
he's just the analytics manager.
So you sit under this second column, if you like?
Basically, yes.
Yes. All right, that chart can be brought down. If we could just bring up paragraph 5 of Mr. Godfrey's witness statement, please. Now we can see there, Mr. Godfrey, that you've had 12 different positions at Crown and Burswood over the years. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Now, each time that you've had a new role, was it the case that it was a promotion?
Yeah, from inspector to assistant pit boss grade 2, pit boss. Yes, they were all basic promotions up until international room manager.
All right, we'll talk about that in just a moment.
Yep.
Because I'd just like to get an understanding of your different roles. And so when you moved through the ranks, were you sort of tapped on the shoulder, or was it a case of applying for these jobs? Or
I was joined as an inspector. I was, as you say, tapped on the shoulder for assistant pit boss and also pit boss grade 2 up to pit boss. It was just a natural progression. And the same with assistant gaming shift manager. When it came to international room gaming shift manager, I went for an interview.
all right. Now, I know it's some time ago, but do you recall what the difference is between a pit boss and a grade 2 pit boss?
Could have been pay,
All right.
may have been. Can't quite recall.
And now, is it the case that pit bosses are no longer called that?
Yeah, they're called TGSMs, table games shift managers, I think, yes.
And is it the case, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your chronology correctly, that you held several positions at one time? If you have a look at paragraph 5E,
Yep.
there's a reference you make to assistant gaming shift manager commencing on the 7th of August, 1988. So you see how that overlaps with the pit boss role above?
Yes.
So is it the case that you held 2 positions?
Yes, so basically I was a pit boss, but when required, I stepped into the assistant gaming shift manager position.
Okay. Well, what's the difference between the 2 roles?
Pit bosses, back in those days, were looking after gaming pits. The gaming pit has numerous tables. And
So an area of the footprint?
Area of the footprint. And the pit boss's duties were basically to look after the area, look after the inspectors, the dealers, and just make sure that the games were dealt correctly, sort out any issues that might have occurred at that particular point in time. That's the duty of a pit boss. The assistant gaming shift manager was basically in charge of the whole gaming floor.
Right,
The gaming shift managers were in charge of the whole floor. So when I was on shift, I took the duties of a gaming shift manager, and my responsibilities were virtually everything that was happening in table games, whether it be on the main gaming floor or back in those days, the international room.
Right. So is it the case that when you were stepping in as assistant gaming shift manager, is it because you were the most senior pit boss on the shift at the time? Is that?
I wouldn't say senior. I think I was just off that position. I don't know how many assistant gaming shift managers there were at that time. I can't recall, but you could probably say that.
Now, can you tell me about you touched on this briefly already, that you had to apply for the international room gaming shift manager.
Yep.
What did that role entail?
It was more of a PR orientated role, public relations, basically getting to know the members of the international room. I'm talking about the local members, the WA-based local members. It was to drive membership as well, to increase membership to the international room. And the
room, not any rewards program, or is it just to access to the international room?
Access to the international room. However, they were part of, I think back then it was called Club Burswood, from memory. But once they moved into the international room, it was a separate style of membership.
I see. Now, how did you drive membership of the international room?
It was a matter back then, I suppose, of looking at the players we had out on the main gaming floor and
Now, were you just looking, can I just clarify,
Yeah.
were you looking at electronic gaming machine patrons or just table games?
just table games.
Okay.
Just table games. So we have a system. We've got a system called Psycho now. Can't remember what it was called prior to that, but it gave us financial information on players throughout the whole gaming footprint, table games players. So really, it was a matter of looking through, the hot player inquiry, which is a basic report, finding out, who was playing and where, and approaching, having a chat, showing them, if they'd like to sort of have a tour of the international room, what their thoughts are like. Would they be interested in joining?
Sure. Now, in terms of the tracking, and you were saying there you were referring to reports, was it tracking patrons just with that Club Burswood membership, or was it?
Yes. If you didn't have a Club Burswood membership, then there'd be no record on the system about you.
Okay. So when you're doing the drive to get membership up, you're really focusing on those people that were already members.
Correct.
Of Club Burswood. I see. So when you moved to the international room as a gaming shift manager,
Yeah.
was your only interaction then with the main gaming floor just to get the new members for that room, and were you otherwise based?
I was based in the international room, with the exception of, contacting players,
Okay.
out on the main gaming floor.
And
Plus,
what-
sorry, go
Sorry,
on.
no, go on.
And of course, we had their phone details and everything, so it might have been a phone call as well, introducing yourself.
All right. And then when you say you were based mostly in the international gaming room, were you walking the floor
Yes,
in that and just getting to know the patrons?
correct.
Did you have anyone report to you when you were in that role? And who were you reporting to?
Back then, I think there's a chap by the name of E.P. Yao. Yes.
That's all right. It was quite some time ago. Now, you moved on in April 2005 to be the VIP Development Manager for WA.
Yep.
What did that role entail?
It was very similar to the International Gaming Shift Manager. There was just a different title change.
Okay. And then in June 2009, you became the Manager of Premium Business WA.
Yep.
What was that role?
And a similar role.
Can you tell the Commission if there are any differences at all that spring
No,
to
it
mind?
was really hands-on, face-to-face, looking after patrons.
How would you go about looking after the patrons?
Oh, look, we had many benefits that we could offer patrons in the way of hotel accommodation, complimentary dinners, tickets to shows, sporting events, etc., etc. So we utilised those benefits to offer patrons that we felt that deserved the additional benefits that we had on offer.
And how would you work out who deserved those benefits?
We'd look at basically spend and obviously turnover, visitation, and who would be classed as our top-end players.
So is it the case that the more a patron was spending, the more benefits they would receive?
To a degree. However, there were a lot of requests, and we used to go out with offers, but there was always a lot of requests from patrons, for restaurants and hotels, and what shows have you got this weekend, or want some tickets, or whatever the case might be. So it was a kind of a two-way.
And so in a typical week, what portion of your week was dedicated to organising benefits, dealing with those inquiries and then offering them to patrons?
Oh, look, it was happening 5 days a week. So and it depends on, what was on at that particular point in time. So there was no specific set day as such.
And when you became the Manager of Premium Business, were you working Monday to Friday as you are now?
No, that was... No, I usually had Sundays and Mondays off, and those hours were very, very, very flexible.
Now, is there a difference between VIP and Premium?
Well, VIP, there's no difference. It's just premium now kind of, I suppose, describes local members more so than VIP generally, which is overseas, etc., etc.
Okay, so you can only be classified as a premium player if you're a local patron?
No, it's just a title of the department. So it's premium gaming, and under premium gaming sits the local members.
Now, just going back to the benefits, which was the earliest role in which you were able to offer those benefits? When did you have the authority? When did you
International room gaming shift manager.
And in terms of the limit of your authority, was there any limit?
In regard to spend?
Yes.
I don't think there was ever a limit as such, but we had to be very wary how we distributed those benefits.
Did you have, say, a quota for the month, like Mr. Godfrey? You can hand out 10 complimentary meals for the month, or
No, not. It was pretty sort of open.
were there any sorts of benefits where you had to get authority from someone above you?
Yes.
What sorts of things?
Look, if we were to give an open comp to a player in one of our top restaurants, or whatever the case might be,
Sorry, an open comp?
open comp, which means that there's no price pool, there's no cost, there's no sort of amount put to that particular
no
comp.
maximum.
I would probably sort of pass that on. I would pass that on and say, look, I've given them an open comp to this particular player, and we'll see how it basically goes.
So you do that in advance or after you?
Probably from memory, probably in advance.
And who would you be seeking? Who did you seek authority from to do those sorts of things?
Back in those days, it could have been EPL. I can't quite recall who else.
All right. Now, when you were the VIP manager of table games in the Pearl Room, you were in that position for about 13 months, is that right?
13 months.
That's at 5i?
Oh yes, I can see that now.
Yes. And you had 4 hosts report to you in that role?
Yes, that was. I'm not too sure of the dates though. I was a little bit kind of sketchy with these dates, unfortunately. But during that period of time, I had 4 hosts reporting to me.
And how was their role different to what you were doing?
It was quite similar to a degree. It was a hosting position, and lots of face-to-face. Spent most of the time, in fact, all the time in the Pearl Room, with the exception of when they were attending events or functions or the like.
And what was that exception, sorry?
If they were attending an event in one of the restaurants, or if they were taking some players off-site.
Oh, okay, I see. And did you ever take any players off-site?
Yes.
Yeah, to what sorts of things?
Of restaurants, sporting events, Subiaco, any other sort of, I took a bunch of players once to Fremantle Jail, where we organised a function in one of the cells there one evening. We had, we had some blues music player, and food was set up and all that. It was just something different out of the norm that we
And those sort of functions, are they during your work hours? So are you being paid to attend those?
Yes.
And were you ever allocated to particular patrons?
Not at that time. I tried to get to know as many people as I possibly could, but there was no one was allocated to me per se.
All right. And then you moved on to a VIP premium player manager. Is that much the same role?
Same role.
Just a change in title?
Type, yeah.
Was there a change in salary, do you recall?
No. The only salary changes we had was the usual yearly, whatever it was.
So you were doing much the same things as a VIP premium player manager?
Yes.
As a VIP manager of table games in the Pearl Room. And who were you reporting to when you were a VIP player manager? Do you recall?
That would have been Richard Smith from memory.
All right. And would he allocate tasks to you?
Occasionally, yes.
What sorts of things would you be
Oh,
asked
look,
to do?
we may have X amount of rooms in a hotel to fill, so we'd spend a few hours on the phone calling up players, see if they want to spend a weekend in the hotel or a night in the hotel.
Complimentary nights in the
Complimentary
hotel.
hotel, yeah.
I see.
We might have a whole bunch of tickets that need to be distributed out to certain players. So,
For
again,
the theatre or sports or things like that?
exactly right, yes.
Now, prior to your, and just again, was that a more of a shift work kind of role in that one, or were you
Well, when I
having
say
the Sunday, Mondays off?
Yeah, it was usually Sundays and Mondays off, but you kind of worked depending on what the business required. So it could have been, you might have been coming in early one particular day or whatever, then later the weekend. So it varied. It was very flexible.
So it was more about an adjustment of times rather than being paid overtime.
Yes.
I see. Now, prior to your current role, you were the VIP compliance manager.
Yep.
For 4 years. Can you explain the difference between that role and your current role?
It's quite similar in the sense that I was overseeing the compliance, I suppose, needs of the Pearl Room.
And what do you see those compliance needs of the Pearl Room as?
Well, we've got a fairly strict, because of the smoking exemption that we have in place, we've got a very strict member and guest entry policy.
Yes.
And the policy and our standard SOPs state that a member can only bring in, at this point in time, 3 guests. So the reports that are generated on a daily basis is that we were checking to make sure that the members and the hosts were sort of following that particular protocol in regard to how many guests were getting into the room. We had to make sure that we weren't letting any players in or guests in that had been barred or self-excluded. And because we've got a fairly sort of stringent internal audit team, we had to make sure that we were following all the procedures and all the SOPs in regard to making sure that the right people were getting into the room.
And if there's an occasion where someone's in the Pearl Room and they shouldn't be, what is it that you do?
Me personally, I wouldn't.
If that's something that comes up in one of those daily reports.
Yes, look, it happened very, very rarely, and it's usually the hosts, if they accidentally or inadvertently allow somebody into the room that shouldn't be there, then they're asked to leave almost immediately once it's been recognised.
And those, just going back to those daily compliance reports, given that you work traditionally 5 days a week, is anyone checking those on the 2 days that you're not there, or is it just a matter of catching up?
Just catching up.
I see. Now, just moving on to the topic of training, Mr. Godfrey, you obtained a Diploma of Business in the mid to late 1990s, is that right?
I'd say so, yes.
And now, was that something you organised yourself or something that Burrs would arrange?
Burrs would arrange it.
And paid for that for you?
Yes, they did.
Now, when you first joined the Perth Casino back in 1986, you recall attending an orientation?
I can't recall actually. I'm thinking there was one, yes, but I just cannot remember.
Yes, and I think you say in your statement that as best you can recall, the orientation didn't cover off on anti-money laundering, on counter
Yeah, I really can't
terrorism
recall back then.
funds.
Yeah.
All right. And you can't recall from the early days doing any risk management training in respect of EGMs or the fully automated table games?
No.
Nor the responsible services gaming?
That would have been one of the courses, the online courses that we all three had to do back then. But there may have been some training.
In the 80s?
Oh, from the 80s.
I'm trying to think if there were computers there.
I'm not that old. I am actually. I can't recall what sort of training I would have had RSG wise back in
Yes.
6 onwards. I really
Sure.
can't.
Now, it's your evidence, is it not, that you don't have much to do with the international commission business or
Correct.
junkets when that was happening in Perth? Save for maybe some slight involvement, I think you said in the 80s when you were a pit boss?
Yes.
Right. So your focus really has been, since from the 90s onwards, is really just the local market and then moving to the more premium
Correct.
market as the years has gone
Yes.
on. Okay. Now, just on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing risks, I'll just refer to those, AML,
CTF.
CTF. Now, you say at paragraph 24 of your witness statement that during the course of your employment, you've undertaken training generally.
Yes.
And then at paragraph 17, you say that you gain knowledge about AML, CTF, risk management issues through online training. Do you recall when you first had that training?
AML online training has been going on for quite a number of years. We had refresher courses, obviously, but I can't give you any specific dates.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall what your initial training, what it entailed? You were talking about, has it always been online in the early days?
I do remember some time ago we had Austrac come in and present basically what they're about in regard to AML. But the majority of it was purely online after that. But this, when Austrac came in, that was 25 something plus years.
Right, and they haven't they haven't come back in and presented since. And what do you understand Austrac is and what it does?
Well, they're obviously dealing with AML and CTF. When it comes to us having to report various transactions, whether it be suspicious, whether it hits the threshold transaction, it goes to Austrac for them to do whatever they basically do in regard to following up, doing their investigations and the like.
Do you recall at the time of that Austrac training that everyone had to attend, or whether it was just certain
No, everyone had to attend.
Okay. I just want to get an understanding of your AML, CTF training refresher courses that you've talked about.
Yeah.
So is that something that happens regularly now?
Yes, we just get a reminder through the system, through the learning development system, saying that you're now due to do a refresher on AML or any other course that we have to sort of
And
go
how
through.
often do the AML refresher courses happen?
From memory, it's about every year.
And it's an online refresher?
Online.
Is it, I'm just trying to understand the format of it. Is it sort of, here's a scenario, select the best multiple choice answer?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Or just basically sort of read through each of the units and get an understanding of what's shown.
What are some of the units canvassed?
Or where they describe, for instance, structuring in a way that's where people try to sort of go under the radar. We're putting in amounts under sort of $10,000. It talks about bill stuffing, people putting money into machines and just getting out the ticket to cash in, smurfing, where different amounts are going into bank accounts, cuckoo smurfing, which is where unsuspecting bank accounts are infiltrated with money, that sort of thing.
So is it an interactive refresher, or is it just more so, or are you just reading? Here's a reminder about what these things are.
From memory, I think there's a bit of interaction where you have to answer a few questions during the training.
And how long does it typically take you to finish those refresher courses?
Probably around about 25 minutes on occasions, half an hour maybe.
Now, in paragraph 17, you also say that you gain knowledge about AML CTF risk management by being advised by superiors on various matters. What are the various matters you've been advised of?
From memory, we had, there's a guy called Nick Stokes who basically started the whole KYC journey. I think he had quite a lot to do with the actual AML policy.
KYC?
Know your customer. And the AML policy, company policy between ourselves and Melbourne. And we had some sessions where he just basically went over certain things of the policy, discussed, this is the direction we're going in, and that's it.
And so did he really sort of kick off the
Yes.
AML
From
regular training?
I don't know how many people he did it to. I was just fortunate enough to be in meetings where he did a bit of an overview as to what's happening.
Right. And when did he join?
Oh, I can't tell you. I know he's probably just left. I'm not too sure when he actually joined.
Now, turning to paragraph 18 of your statement, you say in the last couple of years you've expanded your AML CTF knowledge
Yep.
through online and face-to-face training. Did you seek this training yourself, or was this training directed?
The face-to-face training,
Yes.
yeah, we had a PowerPoint display. There was a chap by the name of John Egan who was doing most of the training, although I presented one session myself, and I attended probably about 4 or 5, just as a matter of course. So every time he was doing a session of face-to-face training, I'd be there as well.
And so, what was his name again, sorry?
John Egan.
John Egan. And so when did these face-to-face training sessions?
They started in the last 12 months, 18 months.
And is that presented to all staff?
We were just taking care of our premium hosts, our premium experience hosts, and the Riverside hosts.
So you're not sure whether it's been rolled out to the main gaming floor?
I couldn't tell you offhand at this point.
And you said you took some of those training sessions
did
yourself?
one.
You did one?
Yes.
And were you given particular training, or was it just a matter of copying the presentation that Mr.
Basically,
Egan did?
copying, reading, preparing myself, getting an understanding of it.
Yes. And how long was this face-to-face presentation?
That usually lasted for about half an hour again, give or take, maybe 45 minutes, depending on the amount of questions we received at the end of each of those sessions.
And staff are attending these during their shift?
Yes.
And what sorts of things are you covering off in that training?
Again, all the different types of money laundering that can occur, the effect on Australia and the amount of money that Australia's losing per year because of CTR. CTF, beg your pardon. And yeah, just all the things for the staff to be able to look out for, the importance of not tipping any members off if we're doing, say, UAR, which is an unusual activity report.
Yes.
So really just learning about what to look for,
Yes.
and be very mindful that if you are doing a report or you're reporting anything whatsoever, not to tip the players off.
And so in those presentations, it's also canvassing the procedures.
Yes.
So it's what to look for.
Yeah.
And what to do when you see something.
Yes.
What sorts of things are the staff told to look out for?
Well, if they're gaming staff, really anybody that's trying to buy in, if they're buying in for 10,000 or more on a gaming table, how to report it. If they see a particular patron buying in for small amounts on various tables but not actually gambling, to obviously report it as a suspicious matter, unusual matter. Any players that they see, on the gaming machine side of it, if they're putting in vast amounts of money into machines and just taking out tickets. Any unusual, possibly if they've noticed a couple of players swapping money with each other and then going to a table and buying in, those sorts of things.
And in terms of the process, you mentioned UARs. Can you just explain what the process is when staff...
Okay, so if somebody completes a UAR, it's done online on iTrack, which is a reporting system. And once they've actually put the details down onto iTrack, it then goes to AML for them to further the investigations where necessary.
Have you ever lodged any UARs yourself?
I haven't, no.
Do you know whether once you've lodged a UAR, whether the reporting staff member gets any more? Are they sort of kept in the loop as to what happened with that report?
I don't think they do, actually. I think they report it and then that's the end of it.
Okay, it moves on to
Yes.
someone else's responsibility.
Yes.
And now, just you haven't received outside of Crown any AML CTF training from any external providers at
No.
all? It's all just been internal?
Internal, yeah.
Is there anything new that you've learnt in these last sort of 12 months where you're doing this face-to-face training? Just going back to paragraph 18 of your statement, you say that your knowledge has expanded. So I'm just wondering, can you think of anything that...
It's just a generalised understanding, more so than it was probably 10 years ago in regard to the importance of AML.
or more a deeper understanding?
A
of
deeper
what-
understanding, and yeah.
Now, just if we could turn to paragraph 24 of your witness statement, where you list off a number of trainings that you've received, and I just wanted to ask you about some of this. The cybersecurity awareness training, what was that and what did that entail?
Cyber awareness. I think that's probably the hacking and the possibility of information that I might have stored on my system getting into the wrong hands.
And then AML CTF risk awareness training table games. Was there a specific table games AML training?
I just can't recall, to be quite honest, of that particular training session.
So if I understand your evidence, you would get an annual online AML training.
Yeah.
Not too sure when that started though.
Couldn't tell you offhand, no.
And then just in the last 12 months, there's been face-to-face training.
Yes.
How many have you attended?
I've attended, I'd say, from memory, probably about 5 or 6.
And is it the same content every
Same
time?
content every time, yes.
Okay. So you're just attending those as a refresher or just to lead by example, or?
More so lead by example, and, the hosts who are part of Premium Gaming is, lead by example more than anything else.
Okay. And then as you said, you've delivered one of those
Yes.
online trainings. Face-to-face trainings.
Yep.
I just want to go back to paragraph 24 and just really tease out whether any of these AML trainings that you're referring to here are different to any of those I've just talked about. So you've got the AML CTF targeted training.
Right, which is the face-to-face.
Yes. All right. So that's the things that have been happening in the last 12 months.
Yep.
Then the AML CTF risk awareness training.
That would have been online. I can't remember exact details of what that training entailed,
Sure.
but it would have been online.
Okay. And you mentioned also casino awareness training. That's the last training you mentioned there. And what's that training?
Again, it would have been online, but I just can't remember any sort of specific details of that particular course.
Have you ever, how long has the UAR process been in place?
From memory, about a year, 18 months, I'm thinking.
And what was the process or procedure before that,
It
before
was
the UAR?
The S and the suspect. I can never remember these letter S. I think it was SMR suspect.
That's all right. If you don't remember the name, that's okay. But do you remember what the process was? What did that process involve? How is that different to the UAR?
It would have been completed in the same way as a UAR. They're both exactly the same processes.
Right.
I've just changed
Change the name?
the names for it, yeah.
I see.
Suspicious matter reporting, so SMR, okay. And then
And-
that would have gone down to the AML department to sort out.
Okay, and so you've never had cause to lodge a UAR. What about an SMR
Ever have done.
in the entire time that you've been at the casino?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anything suspicious and not reported it?
No, I've never seen anything suspicious.
No. Now, in paragraph 30, you describe that your roles, and I think you said that in your evidence today, that it's more of a public relations role, dealing with member relations.
Yeah.
By that, do you mean that AML initiatives and procedures was not really part of your job?
Sorry, just repeat that again.
Is that, did you see that AML, given your public relations
Yeah.
role as you saw it, did you then see that AML was not really part of your job or responsibility?
No, that was probably more so operational, with things that are happening on the gaming tables. And I was never really part of that. Mine was just purely a PR role with members.
Right, but you did have cause to be on the gaming floor,
Yes.
so you could have been exposed to things, but you just never saw anything?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Were you on the lookout for things?
Not generally, no.
Okay. Would you agree with me that AML is really something that all staff at the casino ought to share responsibility for
Absolutely.
and be on the look for every time they're on the gaming floor?
Constantly.
And would you agree with me also that all staff ought to be aware of the procedures, such as the UAR procedure, to report those things?
Most definitely.
Now, I just want to ask you about paragraph 31 of your statement that's on page 5. If we could bring up pages 5 and 6 side by side, please. And this, you're referring to iTrack here, which you've just mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And now you just say in the last line, you refer to a notices of revocation of licence.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
It's where somebody is virtually barred from the whole resort. So if an NRL has been served to a particular player or a patron for whatever the reason may be, it means they're not allowed to come back onto the resort.
So it's a section 26
26
barring notice?
26.2
Yes,
is more so you can't step onto the gaming footprint,
yes.
but you're allowed to use hotel and other facilities around the resort, but you can't go onto the gaming floor or gaming footprint. So
Whereas revocation of licence is the entire.
it's the entire
I see.
resort, yeah.
Now, I'm just going to move on to responsible service of gaming. Now, you say at paragraph 44 that there's always been online training, but more recently there's been face-to-face training. Is that right?
Yes, we had a session probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I believe that they've been going through all the gaming stuff as well as an ongoing thing.
Okay, and who's running that?
That would be the RG department run by Melanie Streeline and her people.
Okay, and what did that face-to-face session involve?
What to look out for in regard to possibly identifying somebody that might be having gambling problems or suffering from gambling harm, and it would be just basically how a person is acting at a table, gaming machine, just in general.
So it's not a specific to a table games scenario. She's been covering both.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Oh, I see. And what sorts of in that training, what sorts of things were you told to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, you'd be looking at people who may be becoming aggressive, maybe visibly upset, making remarks that might sort of lead us to think, well, is there a possible problem? Constant trips to the ATM machines, just general behaviour changes that we need to look out for that could say that this person is not having a particularly good time at this point.
Mm-hmm. And how long did that training last?
That was, from memory, about half an hour, 45 minutes.
And do you know if there's a plan to make that more regular, the face-to-face training, if it's previously all been online?
Online, I couldn't tell you.
And just on the online training, do you recall when that started?
I've done it for a number of years now. I can't remember what year it started.
More than 10 years ago? Could you say that?
Possibly.
And what can you tell me about the online training? Was it an annual
Yes,
thing you had to do?
and then refreshers. But again, it's very similar to, what we've just discussed, in the sense that, what to look out for in regard to a patient's behaviour, where to escalate it to, who to call, who to report it to, just a general process of when.
And was it a separate online training to, say, the AML training? Do you do them as separate modules, I guess? Or
Yes.
you sit down and you do all your annual training in one hit?
They'll come intermittently, depending on when you first did the first one, and a year later you do your second one, and so on.
Do you just get like an email reminder saying
Yes.
it's time to
You've got to log
refresh?
on, and then then you'll have a list of outstanding online training courses that you have to do,
Yes.
and you'll just complete them within a specified time. You're actually giving a time to complete them,
Yes.
and you just have to follow those guidelines.
And again, is it the online training, just to get a sense of what that included? Was it sort of a multiple choice? Here are some scenarios. What would you do?
Yeah, basically that sort of thing. Choose A, B, C, or D if you like. What would you do in this sort of situation? Who would you report it to? Give you some sort of examples.
And do you get any feedback if? Do you find out how well you did in the refreshers?
It tells you at the end whether you've passed it or not, and if you haven't, you've got to do it again.
And when you do it again, it's the same module, or do they give you a different one?
You just might have, incorrectly answered a couple of questions,
Yes.
which they don't tell you at the
So
time.
you go, well, it's not B this time. I'll a different level. Right.
To a degree.
I see. And was that the same sort of completion time, 25 minutes, like you were saying with the AML training?
Give or take, yes.
And it changed each year?
The actual training program.
Refresher? Or was it the same questions every year?
I can't remember the last. I think they might have updated that particular course once, but I can't remember.
You can't recall if it's different each year?
I don't think it is different each year. They may update, but I couldn't tell you offhand.
Okay. And compulsory for all staff?
Yes.
And did you find that refresher training useful?
Yeah, to a degree. It's a good reminder. But when you've been in the business for the length of time, you've got a relatively good understanding of what makes people tick and what to look for, and anything that might sort of stand out as being a warning. You know.
Sure. And just going back to the face-to-face training you had 5 to 6 weeks ago, did anyone explain why the sudden change to face-to-face training?
I think it sort of it came out of the fact that more emphasis is needed on RG moving forward.
And who are you hearing that from?
Good question. I can't recall.
Now, just going back to paragraph 24 of your witness statement, that's on page 4, you refer there to responsible gaming for managers training. Can you tell me about that? And how that was any different to this annual online refresher, and then the face-to-face training you've done in the last 5 to 6
You're saying,
weeks?
sorry, is that paragraph 24?
Paragraph 24,
During the course of my employment?
yes.
The end of the second line, I think, Mr. Godfrey.
Yeah, I've seen it, I think it's responsible gaming for managers. That would have probably been online as well.
You don't have any specific recollection
Not of
about
that one, no.
what that was and why it was only for managers?
No.
All right. Turning back to paragraphs 45 and 46 on page 7, and you've given evidence that it's an overview of what the staff should look out for and how to identify someone that might have an issue with gambling. How about the scenarios on table games and EGMs? Were there situational videos, I think you refer to in your statement there?
Yes.
Is that part of the online modules or the
Basically,
face-to-face?
The online module.
Is it like a...
You'd have little play acts for somebody sitting at the table games. And I think also there was, from memory, a clip of a person getting upset on a gaming machine, I think.
Right. And then is it asking what should you do in this situation?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what's your understanding of the procedure for staff in respect of RSG if they see a patron?
Okay.
So they've seen a patron, they've had the training,
Yep.
that someone's looking like they're struggling. What's your understanding of the procedure?
They've reported to their immediate supervisor. The immediate supervisor would probably get ask some questions in regard to the behaviour of the patron, what's brought you to make this observation, and then
Is this a verbal report or is
it'd be a verbal conversation between the supervisor and the dealer, as an example, and then RSG would be contacted, given by the supervisor, given the information as to the observations and what's basically happening, and then RSG would come up and have a chat with that specific patron.
So it's a fairly quick process from what you understand, that it happens. Someone from RSG attends soon after that observation is made?
Yes.
Has anyone ever reported to you RSG concerns?
Just trying to reflect back. As in a staff member?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it would have happened. I can't
think of an example.
I can't think of a specific time.
And what about patrons? Have patrons ever approached you and say,
Yes.
I'm struggling?
Yes.
And what have you done in those scenarios?
I've given them, after speaking to them, I've given them the opportunity to organise a meeting with RSG, to sit down, have a chat with them, give them the options of what they can do if they're finding gambling is becoming a bit of a harmful exercise. I'd go through the process of self-excluding as well.
Would you go through that process with someone from RSG there, or are you just having
Usually,
a conversation?
I would. It really depends on the situations, but I mean, I can go through what what they can basically do once they've spoken to RSG. So I can give them a bit of background as to what to expect. The other option is that, if you are finding it difficult, you don't particularly want to self-exclude, we've got some timeout options that you can sort of enter into, X amount of months or whatever the case might be, without physically self-excluding. But ultimately, the full conversation would be had with RG in regard to...
Can you just explain that timeout process for me? You do mention that in your statement.
Yep.
So that's different to the barring.
Yes.
And could you just explain how that works?
They'll sit down with an RSG officer downstairs. They'll discuss what issues they're basically having. They'll say that, look, I need to take some time away from the place, or it might even be suggested to them to take some time away. And they'll go into an agreement where, say it's 3 months, that I believe they've signed something to say that they won't be back onto the gaming floor for 3 months, or whatever the agreed time period was. And when they decide to come back, they have to contact RSG, go through another sort of interview with them, and then take it from there.
Do you know what happens if, say, they agreed on 3 months, if they try and attend the gaming floor in that period?
They will be given they'll be given a chance and they will be asked to leave. If it happens again, then that...
Who asks them to leave? Is it like
It would
security?
be security, or even RG. You know, if RG find out that they're re-entering when they've signed an agreement, then it could end up in a full barring.
Mm-hmm. Are staff notified, or are you notified when RSG gets involved with patrons?
We receive emails on a daily basis, and it goes to all staff members, basically stating if a patron is not allowed to attend the casino. Because they've obviously had conversations with them during a period of time. They may have concerns about that particular patron. They may have information, history on that patron. And depending on their concerns, they'll contact that person or basically communicate with that person that they're not to attend the casino until they've done a further investigation.
And so that's all contained in an email and disseminated
Yes.
to all staff?
Yes.
And does it have a photograph of the patron
Yes, it does.
as well?
And if you see this patron, and if you see this patron on the casino floor, please contact RG immediately.
Okay. And they're available 24/7?
Yes.
Now, do you see Crown's approach to RSG as proactive or reactive?
Proactive.
And can you explain your own approach to RSG?
Well, if I was when I was in that particular position, because of the, I suppose, the contacts and relationships I've made with a lot of players, just through general conversation, you can get a good understanding in regards to how somebody is faring, how somebody is, what their experiences are like within the casinos. And I'm talking about predominantly table games, and you can get a good idea of, are they having a good time? Aren't they having a good time? What sort of problems are they possibly experiencing? And then, you can make suggestions. You can give them options as to what to do in regard to taking that time out. If it's becoming very, very serious, to self-exclude and basically stay away from the place.
Sure. And so have you referred someone to RSG? In terms of your time there, could you give an estimate of how many people you probably referred?
Difficult to say. I'm not saying it's running in dozens and dozens.
Well, how about the last, say, 5 years?
Last 5 years?
Are we talking, a dozen, or are we talking just a couple?
It could be 3 or 4 from memory. It could be. It's I really can't quite recall. I can't give you the right number. And
so then once you've referred those people to RSG, is that the end of it for you? They're sort of off into another domain, or do you stay in contact with RSG?
I follow up. I mean, we have a fortnightly meeting with RSG, basically discussing any sort of members with issues, pool room members that have issues, or whatever the case might be. Gather and get the feedback back to RG, find out what we've basically done in regard to following up on certain players. I get to know from the beginning to the end as to what's going to be happening to that particular player.
And are these just Pearl Room players
members
that you're dealing with? Okay. Now, just back to that fortnightly meeting, is that the meeting with Melanie Strillin Fox
Yes.
you talk about in your statement? Is that like a committee? Is it just the two of you meeting?
No, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, probably about 5 or 6 people that meet up.
So who meets up?
Myself. There's a couple of CM. One of the casino managers will turn up. Richard Smith turns up. I think there's a Riverside Room manager will turn up as well, and also the manager of e-gaming in the Pearl Room. So
And who's that?
Oh, so we've got you've got Emma Pringle, you've got Elliot Davis, Richard Smith, one of 5 casino managers. They'll change. The names will change, obviously. myself, and sometimes Chris Schumacher's may come in, and Melanie.
And so does Miss Sterling Foulkes, she runs those meetings?
Yes.
And it's really, it's just providing an RSG update every
Basically,
fortnight?
yes.
And in terms of your contribution to those meetings, is that like an information sharing opportunity?
It would be, and look, I may know some players, you know, from years back that are still sort of coming in. I might have some background information on them that might be useful. But it's just generally my knowledge.
Is it a like a formal minuted meeting?
No.
And how long do the meetings usually last?
We're set for about half an hour to an hour, I think.
And so it's just in the calendar every
Fortnight.
Every fortnight. And how long have these meetings been occurring for?
Oh, good 2 or 3 years now.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall why they came about?
I think it's just to keep communication levels going between RG and gaming management. It's important to keep those that communication flowing.
Now, and it's just RSG that's discussed at those meetings.
Yes.
Now, the self-exclusion process at Crown, can you explain your understanding of that?
Yes. So somebody decides to self-exclude, they'll talk to RSG, they'll organise a meeting with RSG. In fact, they can sometimes just knock on the door and walk straight in. They'll sit down, they'll be interviewed by an RSG advisor. They'll obviously give details as to the reason why they want to self-exclude. They'll have their photograph taken. They will they'll sign off a self-exclusion form, okay, to acknowledge that they have self-excluded. And then we'll go into Psycho, which is one of our operating systems, and put down all the relevant details of that person's self-exclusion onto their account, add stop codes as well, to ensure that if they did try to get back in particular to the Pearl Room, and swipe their card, a warning sign would come up and alert us to the fact that this person is self-excluded, shouldn't be there.
And how is it that patrons find out about this self-exclusion process?
There's quite a few brochures around the whole resort in regards to...
About self-exclusion specifically?
Yeah.
And then is it just a matter of the conversations they might have with the hosts?
Yes.
Do you know if people are told about it when they sign up for the Crown Rewards program?
Couldn't tell you.
Do you think that's maybe something that should be done?
Trying to think. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't.
In your view, do you think it's advertised enough? Do you think patrons, like how often do you have a patron say, oh, I know nothing about that?
Right.
So I'm just trying to get a gauge of whether you think
Sure. Look,
the information is disseminated enough.
there's quite a few posters, information. I think it's a fairly well-known practice. I think people are aware of it. Whether it's adequate, I'm sure we could always improve moving forward. But I think there's enough information around to sort of advertise to people that there is this option in place in case, it does get out of hand.
And do you know if there are many Pearl Room members at the moment that are self-excluded?
There's been quite a few in the past 6 to 8 months. In fact, when I say 6 to 8 months, even over the last couple of years, when somebody does self-exclude and the email comes out, obviously we know who that player is. I can't give you exact numbers, but there's been quite a few.
Now, just moving on to KPIs, Mr. Godfrey. Now, you say paragraph 1 of, I don't think that's right. You say in your witness statement on page 2, paragraph 11, that no KPIs have been set for you, but you expect that some will be set. Why is it that you have that expectation?
performance things are settled in. You know, I can't ever remember being given the KPIs for my current role. I expect the KPIs every year. We were given KPIs as part of our PEP, which is our sort of assessment sort of period of time. But because we haven't had it because of COVID for the last couple of years, I'm just expecting that probably when things do settle down moving forward, we might get back into that routine.
Right. And so you've had KPIs previously?
Oh, it's been a long time ago, a very long time ago. It hasn't been a yearly thing.
Right. And so when you last had KPIs, what did they look like? Is it, you know, try and get X amount of Pearl Room members signed up, or I'm just trying to get a...
Honestly, it's been a long, long time since I've had, you know, KPIs sort of given to me, a long time. I really can't remember what they were originally.
Recall?
No.
Now, as for monetary bonuses, have you previously received bonuses?
Yes, I have.
When did you start receiving bonuses?
I think I was part of the scheme, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I believe.
And you're not part of that scheme now?
I haven't been told that I'm not part of it,
Right.
so I'm assuming that I may still be in it, but I haven't been
Yes.
told either way.
And how were they, just trying to get an understanding of how they're calculated? Is it like an end of financial year?
Yeah, it was basically resort-wide. I think it included Melbourne as well. So basically they had the financial targets that had to be met, and they had the health and safety targets that had to be met. So if all departments did well in regards to those two areas, I think they used to look at your personal yearly assessment to see whether you've met your targets, and then that would determine whether or not you received a bonus or percentage of a bonus or whatever the case is.
So your yearly assessment, is that something different to KPIs? Your yearly assessment targets, I think you said.
Yes, it's been honest, it's been a long, long time since I've actually had one.
A yearly assessment target. So does that mean it's been a while since you've received a bonus?
Yeah, yes. I think it's only because we haven't been meeting the required targets as to why the bonuses haven't been given.
Do you recall when you last received one?
I can't recall. It could have been 5, 6 years ago, maybe less. I can't recall.
But it was something that was measured across the entire Perth and Melbourne
Yes.
groups. So you had to tick the box that Perth and Melbourne were meeting the financial targets in all areas, but also those health and safety
Yes.
targets. And then there'd be a process of looking at what you individually did.
Yes.
Okay. And who would you speak to about your bonus? Who would you talk to about your salary and that sort of thing? Is whoever was before Ms. Cairns, or?
When it came to bonuses and when it came to pay rises, that would have been from Barry Felstead.
Okay.
I would have received a letter saying, or, you know, your percentages is this.
Right, so you didn't meet with him, you just received a letter?
Just basically, yeah.
Okay. And that was Barry Felstead when he was CEO of Perth? So there hasn't been any announcements of late about bonuses?
Nothing.
Nothing. Have they typically been significant bonuses that you might receive? In terms of like 50% of your salary as a bonus,
I
or?
wish. I wouldn't go that.
You don't have to give me figures. I'm just trying to get a sort of.
I can't tell you what the percentage was, but it was a nice little windfall when it happened.
Okay, and it would be an annual. When they were getting paid regularly, it was an annual.
Yes.
Thing. Okay.
Yes.
Are you aware? Are there any incentive schemes in place for you or other staff that you're aware of that's not monetary?
Incentive schemes. That's not monetary.
So I don't know. Maybe you get a bonus day of annual leave or things like that.
No, not as such.
Now, I want to move on to reports now. We've covered off on some of this already. If we go to paragraph 25 of your statement on page 4. Now, just in relation to the daily operations report,
Yep.
helps if I'm on the right page. Daily operations. So that's at 25, paragraph E. And these reports related to meeting budget, you say. What budget are you talking about there?
So when I used to receive this specific report, it was basically what the drop was, what the result was, percentage, and whether or not it met the budget for that particular day. And then it had, I think from memory, because it was quite a few years ago when I was taken off the distribution list, but it gave you a good indication as to, on a day-to-day basis, whether or not you were meeting the financial targets.
And so just those different areas that had different budget, what sort of areas? So did like the pool room have a turnover budget? Or?
It was basically for the pool room figures. I mean, it had information about other departments as well, food and beverage, hotel. Didn't really apply to me, but it just gave me a good idea, a good indication as to how the pool room was travelling against the expected financial budget for the year.
And if the pool room budget was tracking below, did you have any systems in place to how to increase it?
Look, we've got all the benefits that we had on offer, that we may sort of go out to players and invite them to certain functions or whatever the case might be.
And is that ultimately to encourage them to come to the pill room more, because the more time they're at the complex, the higher probability?
The expectation is that if we invited them onto the premises, it's obviously entirely up to them whether they wanted to move on into the program after that. But that's the intention.
And in your interactions with the patrons offering the dinners and the tickets, did you express that to them, that there's no obligation to come to the Pearl Room? Was anything said about coming to the Pearl Room?
Well, every time I used to do functions back in those days, I used to have a pocket full of taxi vouchers. And I said, well, thanks very much for coming. Here's a taxi voucher if you'd like to sort of go home, if you've had, maybe one or two wines or whatever the case might be. But it was never along the lines of seeing you've been to this, the expectation is you come into here. It's just something that you wouldn't really do.
But that was the idea behind it all, was it?
Yeah.
And so are you doing much of that sort of handing out the tickets and that sort of thing nowadays?
Oh, no.
Or?
It's purely office orientated now.
And so you stopped that how long ago? Did you come
I phased it out probably within the last year or so.
Okay. Now, just the member turnover reports, which you refer to at subparagraph D. You say from these reports you identify members who have not reached the annual turnover to maintain Pearl Club member status.
Yeah.
So what happens if that turnover isn't reached? What's the process?
Okay, so there's an expectation that when somebody becomes a Pearl Room member, the previous 12 months they have to maintain that specific turnover to retain their Pearl Room membership. So it's basically a rotating turnover report. So the next month a group of players will come up on that report. If they haven't maintained that specific turnover for the previous 12 months, then unfortunately our hands are tied. We have to take away their Pearl privilege or their access to the building.
And is that something that you do? Do you call them up and say?
No, that's usually done by letter.
Right, okay. And do you receive many complaints about that if you have to send those, if those letters
I personally
go out?
don't receive complaints, but the hosts And the managers that look after those players will probably receive the complaints.
Now, are you involved in Pearl Room membership recruitment now?
Just overseeing that the correct procedures are followed in regard to bringing players into the Pearl Room. So I'm not involved in the decision making as such. However, that may change moving forward.
I think you refer to a committee, membership committee that you oversee. What do you mean by overseeing that committee?
So basically in the committee, we have people from surveillance, somebody from AML, somebody from RG. So when somebody puts an expression of interest in to become a Pearl Room member, it will go through a system called Skelter. It's an electronic sort of system that sort of moves paperwork to those various departments. We'll wait for the reports back from surveillance, RG and AML to see whether or not they're okaying the actual expression of interest form, and then it will come back to the membership coordinator to make the final decision.
And is it the case that if they fail any of those three categories, RSG, AML?
RSG and AML, if they say no, then it's a definite no.
Yes.
If surveillance say they're not recommending, then we'll probably look into it a little bit more deeply and find out why they're not recommending.
What are you trying to find out from surveillance?
Anything they've got on record, any history that they have on a specific patron that's applied for the membership. So they may have been involved in something, incidences out on the main gaming floor.
So like
behavioural issues, or try to pass posts on tables or whatever the case might be. So we'll have a look at that and decide whether or not we want to go ahead with it and have a conversation with surveillance, or basically take their recommendation.
Now, in terms of back to the recruitment process, you were talking about an expression of interest form. Is it the case, though, they can be invited as well? Is that a different process?
Well, we say it's by invitation only, and the fact that they're completing a form, they have to be, I'm saying invited, expression of interest. Yeah, so we're inviting them to complete an application form. They might not ask, might not physically go to them and invite them, just saying that you're invited to go.
To find the form and fill it out. All right. If I could just bring up a document, please, CRW.700.025.4166. So this is a slideshow, PowerPoint, that's the word I was looking for the membership.
Commissioner, can I just rise to my feet, note for my friend that there are 2 pages of this document that does contain sensitive information. If my friend is intending to go to either of pages 4172 or 4176, could those pages be kept to the personal screens only and not the public screen?
4172 and 417.
Yes, no, I won't be referring to those.
Right.
Thank you. If we could just go to point 4169, please. First of all, Mr. Godfrey, do you recognise this PowerPoint? It's a standard operating procedure from 2017. Is this the current? Do you know if this is the current?
It's not the current one, no.
Right. Could I just take you to point 4169? And if we are able to zoom in at all on this application form, does the application form for the Pearl Room still look like this?
It's changed again.
What's different at the new?
So this used to be called a membership application form. We've now called it the expression of interest form, and there's more details on the current form than there is on the old one.
Okay, what are the more details? Well, can I ask you this? You'll see on this one, there's a request for the applicant to note their occupation.
Yes.
But their salary isn't requested. Has that changed? Is that still the case?
We're going through a change of expression of interest as we speak, and there's going to be not only personal details of the members or the prospective members, but we'll be looking more deeply into their their salary, their wealth backgrounds.
Financial capacity?
Financial, that's the word. And we're also going to be introducing a code of conduct as well, which is basically what is required of a pilgrim member, that once they're in there, our expectations in regard to how they behave, how they follow the rules, etc., etc.
So these are being drafted at the moment, so
Yes.
they're not in train yet?
Not as at this point in time. In fact, it won't be a hard copy moving forward. It's going to be a digitalised version of the expression of interest.
All right. Thank you. That document can be taken down. So other than the AML RSG points, which are automatic, no.
Yep.
Are there any other reasons why a patron's application for membership to the Pearl Room might be declined?
Declined. Yes, if we're looking at their financial, if we're looking at their level of play, say on the main gaming floor, and because of their visitation, they've managed to get to that specific turnover amount. If they've got to that amount purely because of the amount of times they've visited the casino, once they move into the Pearl Room, and once somebody becomes a Pearl Room member, the limits rise quite considerably in comparison to the main gaming floor. Mm-hmm. So if we've got somebody that is playing $2 out on the main gaming floor, on a money wheel table, or whatever the case is, it would be more than likely that we wouldn't give membership to that particular patron.
Okay, so
only because they would have to increase their level of play quite dramatically to meet our minimums.
So you're looking for patrons that are low level hours of play but high turnover?
High turnover, or they're playing at a level that is similar to what they'd expect when they came into the Pearl Room.
And you're just looking at from the gaming tables, or does that apply to EGMs as well?
I'm just looking at it from the gaming table aspect.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about the reports that you generate. You mentioned at paragraph 26A on page 5, a Cura report.
Yes.
And that you do a compliance questionnaire.
Yes.
What's that compliance questionnaire contain?
Has everybody's memory now?
Is it a report you're currently still doing?
No, basically it's a set of questions that I tick either yes or no to.
Right. And you're doing this every month?
Every month, yes.
And this is for the Legal Compliance Committee?
Correct.
Do you attend those meetings?
Yes, I do.
And what sorts of things are covered off in that meeting?
Every compliance issue that happens to be raised or picked up by the, in this case it's Claude Murray, so he'll get all the compliance reports from all the departments within the casino. That's hotel, food and beverage, engineering. Every department will have their own compliance officer. Mm-hmm. So basically they'll all have to complete the Cura report and then put in there not only the Cura reports, but for instance my daily compliance report with all the compliance issues is also sent to the legal compliance, and he will extract certain incidents that may have happened and will be questioned during the meeting or what action you've taken.
I see. And just back to the checklist that you do on a monthly basis.
Cura.
Yes. I'm just trying to get a sense of what those
Questions are?
Yes.
Have you followed the current entry process as set out in the IGF policy? Have you allowed anybody into the Pearl Room that shouldn't have been allowed into the Pearl Room? It's either yes or no.
Right. And what's the entry process you were just...
The entry process?
Yes. Which is...
So a member, before any... A member has to be... I'll start again. Nobody can just walk into the Pearl Room. Mm-hmm. They have to become a member. A member is allowed to bring in a guest. Now, we need to check that guest's background details before they enter into the Pearl Room.
I think you said previously someone could bring in 3
You
guests?
can bring in 3 guests.
Okay, so up to 3 people.
Yes, but
right.
they need to provide current ID, and acceptable ID, driver's license, etc. And then if there, we have to ensure that there's nothing in the way of barrings or self-exclusions or whatever the case might be, that we'd obviously be alerted to, because we'll have all those details of those patrons in the system. But it's a fairly long process. There's probably about 5 steps that the hosts have to go through in checking. They've got to check Psycho, they have to check another system called Louis, they've got to go do ScanTech with their driver's license, which talks to iTrack, which brings up any sort of anything untoward about that specific guest.
Right, okay. So if I could just bring it back to what these questions are that you're signing off on, you're saying yes or no to whether those processes have been followed by the
Correct.
Pearl Room. Okay, and is it 5 or 6 compliance questions you have to answer every month?
It depends. We'll get a quarterly one, we get a half-yearly one, we get monthly ones. There could
Okay.
be 10, 12 questions, maybe a few more.
And what's your role at these legal compliance meetings?
Is basically to, when we go through the agenda, it's just to answer any questions that might be raised in regard to compliance issues that happened in the previous month.
Just for the Pearl Room?
Just for the program, yes.
And how long have you been on that committee for?
I've been going to that committee for the last three years or so. 3 or 4 years, maybe longer.
All right, now I just want to ask you about the cheque cashing facility in paragraph 79 of your statement. It's on page 12. Can you explain what that facility is?
Yep, sure. So a patron can walk up to the cage, can ask to open up a cash checking facility.
Is this only available in the Pearl Room?
No, that's on the main gaming floor as well. Okay. They'll fill in relevant paperwork for that facility. They'll agree, or they'll put down an amount that they want to access as part of that facility. So say it's $1,000. The paperwork will then go down to the credit committee to be signed off. We'll make some, or the manager dealing with that will make some inquiries as to can they sustain or can they basically look after that particular amount that they've asked for. And we can usually find out, through their level of play out on the main game floor or the Pearl Room. So once it's been...
So you're not sure that any external inquiries are made?
I couldn't be 100% sure at this point.
All right, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine.
So then it goes downstairs, they're checking their level of play.
Yes. I think there may be some additional inquiries, but I don't quite know to what extent.
And then you reference in paragraph 79 the cheque being held for 5 days, a counter cheque or a personal cheque. Do you know why it's 5 days?
That's just the agreement that I've seen in the policy since I've basically been here.
And the difference between, and what do you mean by a counter cheque?
So when they apply for that facility, on the paperwork, they've got to keep a copy of their blank cheque. So when they go to the cage and say, I want to withdraw X amount of dollars from the agreed amount, they'll sign a secondary cheque or counter cheque, okay, that the cage will keep.
So that's generated by Crown?
Generated by Crown. And between the day that they take that money out or withdraw that money, within 5 days, they can actually buy back that counter cheque with cash or some other means. If they don't, then that counter cheque will go to the bank to be cashed.
Okay. So that's really the difference in those processes for a counter cheque and a personal cheque is to save the patron having to go to the bank or present a personal cheque every time.
Correct, yes.
Do you know how many patrons actually access the cheque cashing facility?
From memory, I probably knew of about 3 or 4.
And they were all Pearl Room members?
Yes.
Did you ever offer it to anyone?
Only if I'm asked.
And in terms of a limit, do you know if there's a limit to the cheque cashing facilities?
It really depends on their level of play and the investigations or the information that's a credit control gain.
Right. And in terms of someone wanting to change their limit, do you know what's the process if someone wants to change?
Yeah, they can put a request in to change their limits, and then it will go through the same process again.
And does that take long to come back?
Couple of days or so, maybe.
And now, would you agree with me that until those cleared funds are received by Crown, Crown's effectively providing short-term credit to the patron?
It's a matter of discussion. I suppose you'd have to say, well, you're advancing money to a patron before we're actually sort of retrieving it back. So I'd have to say yes.
All right. I just want to ask you about corporate culture quickly. You say at paragraph 63, page 9 of your statement, that you regard Perth Casino as having a good corporate culture. What's your definition of good corporate culture?
I'm thinking, for the fact that I've been here for the best part of 35 years, and people I've worked with have been incredibly fair, very amenable, very supportive. I've always felt quite safe coming into work. I've always felt respected. So to me, the overall feeling that I have personally is that, if we've got a culture that treats their staff in that sort of fashion, then it has to be good.
Mm. So that's your own personal experience is a positive one. More broadly,
Look, I think
have you observed
in
any
any
differently?
Sure, in any organisation, you're going to have staff members that are happy, content with what they've got, and you're going to have a percentage that are unhappy, and they'll make it known that they're unhappy.
Yes.
But I think generally, it's fairly well received, you know.
All right. Commissioner, I now seek that we just convene a short private hearing, please.
Right. We are now going to go into a private session for a short time. I'm going to make some orders. I would ask that anybody other than a counsel or solicitors for a party who has leave to appear and be represented in the hearing, they could leave the room. Thank you. hand back to Mr. Shaw. In paragraph 49 of your witness statement, you refer to the fortnightly meetings headed or convened by Melanie Straline,
Yep.
at which 4 or 5 other people would attend. I just want to get a feel for what went on at those meetings. So could I ask it of you in this way? I presume those meetings are still happening.
Yes, they are.
Could I ask you to cast your mind back to the most recent one, which you would regard as reasonably standard,
Right.
and tell me what sort of things were discussed at that meeting?
Okay, there may be 3 or 4 names that Melanie may sort of bring up of players that have hit the RG radar. She would explain the background on those individual players and ask for any feedback from the members of that meeting, if they can provide anything else on top of what she already knows, and basically the steps that are going to be taken moving forward into how we're going to be dealing with those specific patrons.
And at any time, did discussions... Sorry, I take it from what you've said that it's reasonably specific to individual patrons
Yes.
who have come to the notice of RSG.
Yes, Commissioner.
Were there any times when the discussion broadened to things of a more general nature, like the approach to RSG, the resourcing of the RSG department, or anything of that nature?
I believe we're going to be changing the way or the amount of time that players can be, that will be spending time in the casino. I think there's going to be a specific time change in regard to that. And I suppose the times when each of those players will be approached once they've hit a specific time, whether it be 3 hours or 5 hours or whatever the case may be. So we've had brief discussions relating or regarding that. But that's not coming in, I think, until sometime in October.
Right, thank you. I want to ask you some questions about the AML-CTF policies. I think you said that you had not yourself ever prepared and lodged a UAR.
No.
What about a SMR?
SMI? Not to my knowledge.
All right. Now, you also highlighted some of the some of the indicia of money laundering, things like structuring, smurfing, cuckoo smurfing, bill stuffing, etc. When did you first become aware? You've been at the casino for a long time.
Yes.
When did you first become aware of those sorts of things as an issue that could have an impact on the gaming operations of the casino?
I'd have to say we knew the basics of when to report certain transactions, but I think it was possibly after the Bergen inquiry when we started to really concentrate on those specific issues.
And that's, I think you referred to it as developing a deeper understanding
Yes.
of those issues. Right, thank you. And again, with the UARs, Ms. Spencer asked you whether, to your knowledge, when someone had lodged a UAR, whether there was any feedback to that person. Did I understand you to say that so far as you were aware, there was no feedback?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Once the form has been submitted and it goes to AML, I don't think the person who submitted it gets any feedback back, to my knowledge. I'll have to probably double check on that.
Now, the next question I want to ask you is about bonuses. And you indicated that bonuses were based largely on 2 things: financial performance and occupational health and safety performance. In relation to you, what are the sorts of matters that would come under occupational health and safety that might affect bonuses given to you?
I would say probably the injury rate, or me personally, or just generally.
So far as you, your entitlement to bonuses were concerned, when you were getting this letter that said there's a cheque in the mail, or however it was done, what were the sorts of occupational health and safety issues that might impact on that for you in your position as the various positions you've held along the way?
If there were any sort of areas within the pool room that could cause accidents, as a matter of example, I suppose people tripping over, corridors not being kept, in the way they should be kept, anything that could possibly cause a health incident to either a staff member or a patron.
Now, a different topic, which is back to problem gambling, and you mentioned observable behaviours that might indicate a gambling problem, and one of them, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of them was frequent trips to ATMs.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Only if I only want you to answer this if you know. What could you tell me about the withdrawal limits on the ATMs at the casino?
I don't know what the withdrawal limits are on the ATMs.
And again, I'm only want you to answer this if it's to your knowledge. But
Sure.
Are you aware whether or not there is any difference in withdrawal limits in the ATMs depending on where they are situated within the entire resort footprint?
Not to my knowledge.
All right, thank you. And my final question to you relates to the entries to the Pearl Room. A member can bring in how many? What's the maximum number of guests a member can bring in?
They're allowed to bring in 3 guests.
3 guests at any one time.
However, we've got a policy in place because of COVID and everything else that's been happening. We're actually limiting it to 1 guest.
At the moment, it's 1 guest.
1 guest, yeah.
Well, whether it be 1 or 3, if the guest gambles, is their monetary gambling activity, does that get credited to the member's turnover, or is that kept separate?
It's kept separate.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Godfrey. Anything arising from
Nothing
that?
arising. Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Shaw?
I don't have any re-examination, Commissioner.
All right, thank you. Mr. Godfrey, thank you very much for your evidence that has been of assistance. The summons will be left in place because the other commissioners will need to review the transcript and the video of your examination, and they may have questions for you. So
Okay.
the summons will remain. For now, you're free to go about your business, and you have our gratitude. Thank you.
Thank
very
you,
much.
Commissioner. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
and 2 p.m. 2:30. Adjourned to 2:30 p.m.